The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Oshkosh Media, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, your host, and very pleased to be joined again. We try to have our guest on twice a year, this guest anyway, twice a year, and it's Mark Rohloff, the city manager for the city of Oshkosh. Welcome, thanks for being back here again.
Oh, happy to be here again.
Yeah. We always try and do something in the summer, and then we try and do something toward the end of the year when you tell us what we can expect tax bill-wise.
Oh, yeah. Well, hopefully I'm here for more fun stuff today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Tax bills won't be one of them. Although the revaluations, that's on my list.
Okay.
But at the top of the list now, I had to move it up because of the events of this week. We're taping this on June 15th, 2017, and this week we have had two pretty significant storm events. I think north of us, Appleton, Green Bay, I think they probably got hit worse, but we certainly have been hit with high winds, lightning, lots of damage to trees, a lot of rain. So my question is, in light of this, are we as a city going to allow for special pickup of brush that has come off the trees and so forth?
Nothing's scheduled just yet, but I just went out today and took a look because some folks had emailed me and said, hey, look, I think it's bad. It's really interesting. You can go to one area and there's really no damage at all. And then some areas, probably the age of the trees and things like that, I saw some significant tree damage on private property. And normally we've gone out there for that type of thing. So I'm going to talk to our refuse folks. They may not have seen those areas, but it just depends on where you are at in the city. And literally one block can change everything. But I was over in the Huntington Downs area just off of 9th, and somebody mentioned something, and I took a look, and I was like, wow, this is a lot different than other parts of the city. So we may have to look at it. It's not widespread, but where it was hit, you can see it was pretty damaging. We had some city trees, the ones in the terrace. We take care of those because those are our responsibility at the city. So our folks were out today doing those, but I noticed a few more on the private properties, and generally when it's a big storm event, that's the type of thing we do. Yeah,
I think west and southwest maybe got hit a little harder than some of the other areas, although I was out driving around last night after everything sort of died down, and even like on the north side of town, like off of Murdoch down in the Menominee Drive area, there were some people who had some large limbs down, not whole trees, but larger type limbs, and they were out there cutting them up and so forth. So it's just a hit and miss kind of thing. Who can explain or understand why or how Mother Nature works, Very mysterious, but we all got rain though. And, and so how's the flooding issue? How are the I can never remember this, Mark. Help me out. Retention ponds or detention ponds? Well,
there's both of them. The retention ponds are typically the ones that are wet all the time. And those are mostly to help clean the stormwater. So after an event, the suspended solids fall out, and after a while we clean the bottom of the pond. The detention ponds, and I always say dry. detention begins with a D, think dry. That's
There you go.
there's my my tip for the day. But those ones are typically for exclusive flood control.
Okay.
And those did very well. We did have some isolated flooding. We have not had an opportunity to do a lot of work in the 9th and Ohio, anything between 9th and South Park. That's still a little tough. We're doing some work there this year in the ponds, but it's still a very constricted area because an old creek was made into storm sewer there. That's probably one of the toughest challenges we have in terms of long-term corrections there. And there was some flooding there that was noticeable. There was some on 20th near Oregon. We think that there may have been some backup in the storm sewer itself because we did some improvements there a couple years ago, and so we weren't expecting that. So we think that something might be clogged in there. So we're going to be sending our TV cameras out there, and I mean, we do that. We get them there. We take a look and see if we find anything
if there's
there,
problems.
and then we'll go after it and clean it out.
Yeah.
Storm sewers are easier to clean because they're typically bigger, so
Sure.
we can send lots of stuff down there to just not people, but we can send lots of stuff down there to take care of those things. And there were some isolated incidents elsewhere in the city, but for the most part, we did pretty well. Again, we still need to do, we have a lot more work to do with stormwater, but this event, I think we managed pretty well.
Yeah. You know, you talked about storm sewers. After we had that really, really bad flood, it was what, I think it was a 500-year flood or something like that.
That's what they say.
How many years ago was that now? Was that
That
about...
was 2008, just before I was hired.
Okay,
So I remember that very well.
I was going to say about 7 or 8 years ago, but that's a good way of remembering it. So I know after that, you guys started replacing some of the older, smaller type storm sewers so that larger ones could accommodate more water. How are we coming on that?
Well, everything is, you know, it has to do with the street project. We've scaled back some of the street projects, try to limit borrowing, but we haven't given up on that completely. We're doing more, you know, more than we did before, but like 2011, 12, 13, we were really going all at it. We're not going all at it as much as we did then, but for example, New York Avenue is getting done this year. Bayshore Lake Drive is also getting done. Those you're getting everything, including the storm sewer. And when we can increase the capacity in those storm sewers, it just gets it out of there a lot quicker. So I think for anybody on New York who may have noticed some problems in the past, a storm like this would have managed pretty well. You may have, you may get a little water on the street initially, and you get a little, you know, puddling and that, but in a reasonable amount of time, it should be pretty well cleaned up. And for the most part, with the exception of Ohio and a couple other places, by the following morning, we were in good shape.
Yeah, even last night, you know, just a few hours after the event stopped, I mean, I really didn't see much of anything in the way of flooding, and I kind of drove all around. The one thing that I did see, and I actually called the police about this because it was City Hall was closed. It was after hours, and they said that they would contact the city street division or whatever. But I was coming down the frontage road, like I'm trying to think now, like from 20th, in between 20th and probably 9th, on Washburn.
On Wash, okay.
And there was just water just rushing down on the side of the frontage road. I mean, it looked like a little mini raging river. And then there was a grate toward the end of it. There was a grate there where it was running into, I'm assuming, a storm system somewhere. But because it was running so fast and furious, and we had so many twigs and trees and whatever that came down, you know, and leaves, it was getting all dammed up and it was starting to back up. So I thought, you know, if nobody knows about this, this could easily, after a time, spill over onto the frontage road. So I called and they said they were going to have someone take care of it.
Typically what happens in those cases, that's great to call, because even if we can't get out immediately, we're not going to put somebody in harm's way to go in there.
Right.
But they'll look and see, has this been a buildup? And the next morning they'll clean it out so that the next storm that comes. Also in that area, we're doing some construction over in that immediate area. You may have seen some yellow our orange cones and things like that. That may have also been a little bit over on between 9th and 20th. We're doing some work in the Maricopa area over there, and storms.
Oh, there, yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
So there
just
may
a
have
little
been,
ways down from Perkins there.
Yep, it could have diverted some water down because of the construction zone and that too. But
well, this was running from south to north, so I don't know, but it was something, and you know, I don't think we're out of the woods yet, because I was just watching the news tonight, and they're saying Saturday could be very problematic again. So this has been a strange week.
well, our staff has this week on the calendar because of this is the week back in 2008 that we had the storms. This is the week.
Was it really?
It was June 8th and June 11th. So it was right after that. So this week is the danger week, and we had storms the same time in 2004 and 2001. So our folks are so happy when this week passes because there is that. And I saw in the weather the other day that the greatest instance of tornadoes in northeast Wisconsin, it peaks at June 14th and 15th. So we're right in that area. That mid-June is the danger zone. So if we can get past this, 4th of July's coming, everything's good.
Yeah. I know in 2001, which of course, you know, was before your coming here, but 2001, and I'm trying to think if it was June or if it was more like April or May, but it was horrible. We had such a bad storm, and you've probably been told.
I was in the area because I was up in Grand Chute at the time, and there were terrible windstorms, a lot of power outages.
A good chunk of the city was without power.
The treatment plant that in the community I work for, treatment plant went offline because the power went out and the backup power didn't kick in. So there were.
So that was June also.
That was June 11th, or it was June 4th, I believe it was. But it was all in that.
Can't we just wipe the month of June off the calendar?
But we love it so much. It's the kids. It's the end of school. You got to take the good with the bad with all that.
Okay, let the kids get out of school, and then we'll wipe the rest of the month off the calendar so we can avoid all these bad storms. So talking about water, people are, and myself included, are shocked at how much the water bills have gone up lately. What is going on with the water bills that is causing them to jump up to the extent that they are?
Anything related to water has to do with your return on the city's, the utilities' return on its investment in the utility. So it's our asset base, how much value we have and how much return we're required to get in order to remain financially viable. And all the projects that we've done the last few years get added to the asset base. We've done improvements at the treatment plant that people don't necessarily see because the treatment plant's behind walls and behind fences and things like that. And the fact that we're doing the water tower and those improvements that are long overdue, that's what's causing the rates to increase. And the council just authorized us to go for another rate increase because we have to pay off the debt of those assets. So it's a very difficult thing. I know what you're talking about.
Well, and you live in the city, you're seeing it too. I mean, it's not like any of us like to get these big bills, and none of us like to pay more taxes. But, you know, the city council and city staff, you guys all live in the city and get these bills too.
I'm not going to look in the eye.
So they're going to go up yet again?
Yes, because
God.
There are two major projects going on. Of course, the visible one is the water tower here in the downtown area, but there's also what's called a clear well, and that is the first place where the water goes after it's clean and treated. And that's over in the treatment plant. That dates back to 1915, I believe. So it goes back to the original water treatment plant. And it is technically in violation of DNR regulations. The clear well in the plant is actually located below the level of the lake, and that is not allowed by law. So the DNR has been on us for a number of years to get that going. So that Clearwell project is in the neighborhood of $14 to $18 million. And so, you know, and it's totally off the grid because you don't necessarily see it, but we're going to be working on that. And of course the tower, and then the other main improvements, but that's what's causing a lot of these increases. But we can't not do the clear well. That's not one of those optional things. That's a regulatory mandate. And it's in the interest of safety. The whole idea is you don't want the well being lower than the lake level. So we have to do those things.
So how much of an increase, like percentage-wise, do you think water bills are going to go up again?
They will go, and I'm just guessing here,
Sure.
the calculation, the DNR, the Public Service Commission, PSC, typically goes lower than what the number we put in, but we follow their guidelines, and then we go in, and then they go lower than that. It could go as high as 15, but it'll probably be in the high single digits, is my guess would be at the end of...
Percent,
yeah.
Okay.
So 8% or so would be my guess. That's an educated guess. Yeah, and it's, that's for every $10 you're going to pay another 80 cents.
I'm going to take my toilets out of my house and put an outhouse in the backyard at this rate.
Well, one of the dangers...
This is terrible.
You're kind of in an awkward position. We are all in an awkward position because we preach saving water, conserving water, and when we do, there's less water, but the facilities still have to get done, and so and the distribution system is still the same. So you still end up paying for those things even when you conserve. I'm not going to tell people not to conserve. You absolutely should conserve, but it's kind of a double-edged sword that we have. Yeah. We're always looking for ways to do things very effectively and efficiently, but when a water tower needs to get done, it's 75 plus years old, 1938, so it'll be 80 years old next year. 75 years, you've pretty much gotten the useful life out of that thing. And we were getting, again, we're regulated by the Public Service Commission and the Department of Natural Resources, and they knew that we were going to need to replace that tower eventually.
Yeah.
And that's
How much is that costing?
I knew you were going to ask that, Cheryl, and I just can't remember. I just know the Clearwell because we were just going through that. I just can't remember, and I don't want to say a number and then be wrong about it.
Are we talking...
Multi-million dollars.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I just can't remember the exact range or anything.
So they really are two truly major type things.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And our other water towers are in good shape. They're relatively young. 30 years is young for a water tower. So we're in
young
decent
for
shape.
us too.
Yes, it is. But and we start rusting at 75 too, I guess.
Sooner.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Some cases sooner. But we were looking at possibly needing to paint the water tower, and we knew that we would never get the investment out of the water tower. Painting the water tower is like $250,000.
Are you talking the new water tower?
Any water tower.
Okay.
We have to paint the water tower every ever so many years. I can't remember the exact number, but it's probably 20 years or so. And we knew that if we painted this water tower, and we were getting pressured to paint it, we would be painting it. A 20-year water tower job would only be good for 5 years because we'd tearing it down. We just didn't want to do that, so we said, well, let's try to drag out the completion of this as much as possible and then get it done, and that's what we're doing.
So to paint it, it's $250,000?
About $250,000, yeah.
Per tower, and we have how many towers? 3?
No, we have 1, 2.
Oh, there's one out north of town, too.
Yes, yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 water towers.
Yikes.
Yeah, so
that's $1.25 million right there, just to paint them. But they all don't get painted every year, right?
Correct. I remember when the whole Event City thing came out. We had discussions with folks who really wanted to promote that and said, let's paint the water tower at 9th. And I said, do you know how much that costs? It's like you don't have the money. And the water tower, again, the life of a paint job is 10 to 20 years. The branding stuff is normally 7 to 10. So the brand would still be there for many years after the project was gone. I said, it is not worth your money. Even if you donated it, please don't do it because you'll be disappointed in the end.
Well, the other thing that has some people upset is the revaluations. And I guess I could explain it, but why don't you explain for people what the revaluations are? Because, a lot of people have been saying, to me, when I talk to them, they say, well, nobody even came to my house. You don't go to every single house. So can you just kind of explain what the city does and why it's done? And is it supposed to be done every 10 years?
No, it's not supposed to be done every 10 years. The requirement by law says that when you fall out of full valuation, as estimated by the state does a projection and they say, this is full value. If you are 10% high or low on full value, they start monitoring you. And if you don't do it within 3 years, they do the assessment themselves.
Okay.
We don't want to do that. That'll be even worse.
Right.
So now we were getting towards 90% of full value when the housing crash of '08 occurred. Mm-hmm. I believe we did it in 2003 or so. So that's pretty normal. Mm-hmm. But the rules changed when 2008 hit. Right. And when that happened, things started to go back up because property values started to actually go down in a lot of places. So those values started to go down, so the ratio was going back to full value. But in the process to going back to full value, there were winners and losers. And I hate to use that term, but I think people can understand it. The real estate, their market goes up, goes down, goes up for you, down for me, vice versa. Yep. And what was happening is even though we were at full value, the variances and all the statistical things, what's the standard deviation, all those things, were really way off. Some of the older areas of the city, property values had gone down and continued to go down. Meanwhile, other areas of the city, say West Side, ranch homes in the range of 100 to 150,000, those picked up in popularity and picked up in value. But those ones go up, others go down. We were still equal, but we were in reality unequal.
Yeah.
So that was the primary motivation to go in and do a revaluation, because from a fairness standpoint, people weren't being assessed their true value from a comparison standpoint. So now we go through, and I can tell you that, and this is only a partial joke, but I've heard from a lot of people complaining about their assessments going up. But I also have people whisper to me that their assessments went down, and it's funny because they'll yell when it's going up and they'll whisper when it goes down. But there's a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. And so I understand the folks whose assessments are going up. But what I like to say is the purpose of an assessment is to fairly distribute the property tax pie when it gets cut in December. And the idea behind that is so that that you're paying your fair share. And if your value went up, it's a property tax, so it's based on the value of the property. And there are folks, and I was talking to Luke Alger, our deputy assessor, who pretty much leads our staff in doing that. He was explaining that the ranch houses in that 100,000, 150,000 range went up. So if you were at 130, you're be able to sell your house at 150, or those were the comparables going out there right now.
Right.
And even $100,000 house was going up to 120. Meanwhile, some older areas of the city have been sold for rental housing and things like that, property values have been going down. That's the whole controversy with rental registry, was that values were going down, and that's a concern. And there are properties there going down $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 or more, and that's where it all equalizes. But there are going to be, for lack of a better term, winners and losers in that distribution of the pie.
Yeah, well, depending on how you want to look at it, I mean, it's a win for us. It may be a lose for someone else. Mine's one of them that went down, not by a whole lot, but it did go down a little bit. And that kind of struck me as odd, because we had done some improvements, and they were improvements where they were major, and of course, building permits were pulled and taken out on that stuff. So the city certainly knows about it. So I didn't quite understand how it went down a little bit, but I know that at some point it will come back up. and with the next valuation probably. But the thing is, and I had a friend also who he had made some improvements to his place. He wanted his to go up, even though it means more in taxes, because at some point he may be looking at selling it. Well, he wants to, I mean, of course they don't go by assessments, they use that as a tool, but they always go by appraisals and comparable values. But it all kind of works hand in hand, I think. Yeah. And so he wanted his to go up.
And if it didn't go up, a lot of folks who invest, reinvest in their properties are reinvesting to maintain its value, and you absolutely want to do that. That's in your best interest to do it.
Yeah.
But you could drop $5,000 to put something, a new roof or new siding, and you want it to maintain its value. For tax purposes, you don't want it to go up, but for selling purposes, you want it to go up. And you have that.
But you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other. So the values have varied, but it's not unusual for somebody to see a decrease even after they invested, because if the investment was done to increase or to maintain the value, and the market gets reset, you may see a couple $100 going down. And I've heard people give me that explanation as well, and that's very anticipated. So
explain it then for folks who may not understand how this works then, Mark, because if you're not going into every home, like you're not, how do you figure out what someone's home should be valued at?
This is, a lot of it's statistical now, and it's looking at what information they do know. There's extrapolations based on that, and it's what's the land going for in this neighborhood. And if it's a hot market, you're going to see sales that show the market going up and the land value goes up. Other cases, ranch homes were seemingly popular. I think after the housing crash, this is just theory, I'm not an expert on this, but I think the theory is that people were going to, if they were going to invest in a house, they're going to be modest houses. They weren't going to be McMansions or anything like that. Right. So the ranch homes, nice starter homes, were popular, and because they became popular, the prices went up. So the sales data did it. So there's tons of data that they analyze, and the open books. Too bad we didn't do this show last week. The open book ended on June 12th, and people up to June 12th could go in and take a look at why this was done, and they'll show you the statistics to understand it. But there are some people who don't want people in their homes at all. When their assessment goes up and you weren't in, they say, well, you never entered my home. But if we say, well, we'd like to go in your home, no, stay away from my home. And, we respect that. But statistically, we have the capabilities now, and we contract with a firm that does this nationwide, and they use their statistics to, they know what sales are going on, they know where they're, what's hot, what's not, but it's all based on sales data.
Sure. Well, and I will say this, I know that we're outside of the open book period now, and that is what it is, but I also know that the city is very, despite what some people say, the city is very easy to work with. I know I had a home that, it was maybe a year or so after the housing market kind of crashed in '08. And I just didn't feel that I had the value there anymore that the city had it assessed at. And I called the city. They sent out someone. It took maybe 10, 15 minutes. She wasn't eyeballing every little thing in the house. They're not there to be nosy. And this was a 2-unit, it was a duplex, it was a 2-unit property. And including both those 2 units, she was maybe there 15 minutes, if that, and that included looking in the basement. And sure enough, I mean, she understood that values in that area came down. She lowered the valuation on the house. Of course, here again, that worked against me when I sold it.
Right.
I didn't get as much as I otherwise might have. So, you truly can't have it both ways. But, I mean, if somebody is absolutely adamant that they have the wrong valuation placed on them by the city, even though it's outside of the book period, can they call and you guys work with them?
It's too late to do it for this year, but that
Okay.
doesn't mean that you can never do it again. You missed the window of opportunity this year because
For your tax bill.
for your tax bill for this year, but
Right.
we have open book every year.
Right.
So people can go over to the assessor's office, and it's always assessed as of January 1st of that year. So even though we're closed for 2017, 2018, go to see the assessors. If you have data to verify that, you can show that. Well, my house is identical to this neighbor's house. They just sold it for X dollars, and mine is valued at $20,000 more. Mine's assessed at $20,000 more.
Yep.
That doesn't make sense. And they will take a look at those things and say, all right, based on this, we can do this or that. It really is a matter of being fair. And as we get closure on this, I do want to bring up another issue that's related to assessments that I think property taxpayers need to be aware of. It's not about their personal home, but there's an issue going on at the state level that is really a concern in terms of, you may have heard something called dark store, in terms of big box stores getting their properties lowered because they feel that their property should be valued as if the building is empty because that's all it'll be worth when we no longer are here anymore. Well, using that logic, then we should wait until you vacate your house and don't sell it and let the weeds grow and everything, and that's what we should value your house at. I think it's absolutely unfair, and your legislators are looking at this right now, and I encourage everybody to call their local legislator, be it their state rep or their state senator, and let them know. Some of our local folks have signed on and others haven't, but they need to realize that when they start lowering these assessments, and what they're lowering them to are just ridiculous. They paid millions more for it. They're paying rent to some LLC that is much greater than what they're saying it should be assessed at. All the factors that our assessors are supposed to use, they've got attorneys from Chicago coming into Wisconsin by the dozens, making these arguments in courts, and courts are buying this malarkey. And I'm being polite, Cheryl. I'm being really polite. And what happens is when the pie gets resliced, then the residences get a much larger share of that pie, and the commercial properties don't.
It always falls back. It always, I don't care what it is, Mark, it always falls back on the middle guy, you know, the middle income bracket people. Whether you own an average home or you have an average income, things are always balanced on the backs of the taxpayers, and it's always those in the middle that seem to, and sometimes the bottom too, that get the brunt of the problems.
So this is going on right now. I think
So
as
if
soon as
people
the
wanna-
budget's done, contact your state legislator.
And what should they say to them? That they don't want this?
Yeah, fix the dark store problem. It's unfair to residential property owners. So thank you for giving me I got on my stump for just a second, and I didn't want to divert from any more questions you have. But
that's good.
You know, we can dink around with a couple $1,000s on our tax bill, but if there's a 10% shift from commercial to residential, we're all eating at. It doesn't matter what the assessor does with a minor number. The big number is a shift, and it's also unfair to the mom and pops. Think of the mom and pop drugstores or stores. They're not able to benefit from this legal argument that these attorneys are using. And so it's unfair to the mom and pop stores who got to compete with these big boxes. I shop at big boxes. I admit it.
I think most of us probably do. I mean, I certainly do. But you talk about that. So they're looking for a break on the front end, but they're also going to get a break on the back end too, I would think, because if they end up having to sell it at a loss, which they probably would under this theory, I would think, then they're going to get to deduct that loss on their business income taxes. So they're going to win both ways.
Yeah, this is a major problem. This is probably as close to a bipartisan effort as you're seeing right now. I think both parties realize the unfairness to it. So this isn't necessarily a partisan thing. I'm nonpartisan, but let your legislators know that this is a major problem, and it's shifting the tax burden from these businesses who are on these primo corners and they have all these fancy fixtures and everything in their stores, and they're saying, no, don't count any of that. We want to be treated comparable to the Kmart over there on Keller. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Some of the big box stores have said, we should be valued what Kmart is. The closed Kmart store on Keller. That's
the empty store that has been sitting there empty for how many years?
It's been, yeah, a good 10 years,
Yeah.
and that's called the dark store, and that's why it's referred to as dark store, because the store is dark. Isn't that crazy?
Now I've got more legislative type
I
work
could talk for an hour on this. You better change topics right now.
Well, let me take a look here at what else is on my list. We want to talk about the granary. Well, let me just ask one thing. So if there is going to be any kind of storm debris special pickups, how will you notify the public about that?
We'll probably get out press releases, get it out on social media,
Okay.
things like that. So Emily Mikowski with Oshkosh Media will probably do that.
Okay.
So we're probably going to make a decision next couple of days. But, based on what I saw, I think we have to at least discuss it.
Okay. All right. So the granary, it's been sitting there languishing for a number of years now. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a property that is on 6th Avenue or 6th Street. Some people call it street, some say avenue. But in between Jackson and South Main. Is where it is, and it's on the north side of the street, and there's some work that's being done there. They've applied for permits and what have you. Talk to us a little about what's happening there.
Sure. The developers are looking to rehabilitate that building. It used to be a very large restaurant. What they're proposing is an office building with a smaller area that would be for a restaurant. These developers could look at something out on the 41 corridor without any of the burdens or challenges that those have, and get a decent return on their investment. These buildings are real challenging, so they try to get incentives to help them make the project pay for itself, because otherwise they'll move on to something else. And this property originally had gone into foreclosure by the Small Business Administration. There were no takers. So a local developer took it on and bought it and has been hanging on to it for a few years. And I think they'd like to do something. So what the council approved was a tax increment financing district. And part of it is it's, for lack of a better term, it is a rebate of property taxes. Because the logic is if they didn't do anything, it would be sitting there idle. So they wouldn't be generating additional property taxes. So we give them a good portion of those property taxes as an incentive to pump back into the property. Now, we have to minimize our risk because we don't have the resources like we used to. So we use what's called a pay-as-you-go TIF, which is all based on performance. So if you want $1 rebated on the taxes, and rebate's the best term I can think of right now, you got to prove that you're generating at least that $1 because we can't give you something we don't have. Right. And the properties there have demonstrated that the rents that they're going to get, the market rents are not that strong, so their cash flow, they'll barely make any money, and business people are in the business of making money. So in the case of the granary, it'll take their what's called their internal rate of return, which is their basis for looking at real estate, from slightly over 1% to just under 5%. So it's not like they're making this huge amount of money. We've also put a provision that if that internal rate of return gets up near 15%, that will cut off the TIF. It'll just be cut off. You've succeeded, you've got up to 15%, congratulations, then we'll stop. But as long as they can demonstrate that they're not getting that performance out of it, then we'll provide them the incentive to keep it going.
Yeah, that approval of a TIF was a pretty controversial issue at council. It voted, or they voted 3-4 on that thing. So there was one vote that pushed it through, and you know, as a taxpayer, I had a tough time with this one. I didn't think that, and I'm not opposed to development, but I didn't think that it qualified for TIF money because the developer was already in there doing work. So it was still going to happen. It maybe just would have taken them longer. But that's the thing about the TIF is that it has to, it's that but for clause in the TIF law that says, you know, but for being given TIF money would this development happen. And it was still happening. And so I didn't understand, I still don't understand how the city can legally give them TIF dollars for this when it didn't really meet the qualifications or the definition of what TIF is supposed to be for.
I think there's a little bit of chicken and egg situation there. I was in that site the day before the council approved the TIF, and there are no improvements in there. It is still, it's stripped down to the rafters. So they were betting a little bit that the council was going to approve it. But they were very clear that if that hadn't gotten approved, they would have shuttered it and just stopped work. So that is a bit of a risk.
Could have been an idle threat.
Yeah, but
never know. You never know.
I have to take those folks on their word. They're local people. We're going to see more small TIFs than we did in the past. In the past, we did big TIFs and took big risks. Now we're taking smaller projects with smaller risks because we want to make sure that if these are going to happen, that we get some results on these things. It lowers our exposure on them. And the idea behind this was that we were going to help them, but they have to perform. So the risk is shifted, which is good for the taxpayers.
Yeah, and I like the fact that the city has been using for the past few years the pay-as-you-go or pay-go TIFs. I was talking about that when I ran for council back in 2005. No one had ever heard of it before, but you know, as a reporter, I had covered other communities and what they were doing, and I saw other communities using that particular type of TIF vehicle, and I said, hey, this is a way to make things work and limiting your exposure a little bit so that you're not out there hanging.
Yeah.
You know?
We have to follow the state law with all those things and the but for. I mean, those guys are betting a little bit that the council is going to approve it, and that's a risk that they take. And if it doesn't work out, well, then they don't get that incentive. I guess one of them would prove it wrong. I don't know if I'm in a position where I want to play chicken with a developer just because I want a long-term relationship with, especially with our local developers. I want to make sure they understand we're going to work with you. There are a lot of TIFs that people don't realize that people come in for and say, and we just say no to. Those don't get approved or disapproved by council because we won't even waste their time. And that's a very difficult decision or a difficult conversation. Tell somebody, your idea really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'm not a business person, I'm not a private business person. I haven't been in that position, and I respect so much the people that do take those risks. So when I have to tell somebody that I don't think it's a good idea, I have to have at least some basis. Now I've done this long enough that I know when I see a good project and not a good project. One of the criticisms of the granary was because it was still called the granary, because of the granary restaurant, well, we're doing TIFs for restaurants. No, that's not the case, because there have been plenty of people that came in for just restaurants. Would I say no to every restaurant? I won't say no. I wouldn't say that. If it's the right project to redevelop something, I'm going to give it strong consideration. But this is a redevelopment of a combination. So I didn't view this as a restaurant. Then the newspaper asked me, well, you're approving a TIF for a restaurant. And I said, well, the beach building TIF right next door here to City Hall has a coffee shop and a restaurant. Is that a restaurant? I don't think so. I never even considered it. The granary, I looked at such a great redevelopment opportunity.
What are they suggesting that they're going to put in there? It will be a restaurant, but aren't there going to be some offices in there?
Yeah, about 60% of the building is going to be offices. So it's going to. They apparently have a local business that's ready to expand, and they want to go there, and they apparently like the cool factor of what they can do with all the wood and everything. So that's exciting.
What other development tools do we have in our toolbox, Mark? Because, at some point the city's going to be TIF'd out, and I look at places like Grand Chute. Townships cannot, under state law, use TIF as a development tool. They just simply can't. Not even if a place is, falling apart and is in disrepair or what have you. So you look at Grand Chute and you look at Fox River Mall that's in Grand Chute, and look what they did without using TIF dollars. Do we have other development tools in our toolbox besides TIF?
Not per se. I was in Grand Chute, so I know quite a bit. Towns can now do TIFs. Since I left.
They can now do them.
In the last 8 years, the state legislature has allowed
very good
some
thing.
towns to do some TIFs. But I think it goes back to the old real estate adage of location, location, location. We don't have big problems along our I-41 corridor, and neither does Grand Chute, because the Highway 41 corridor is hot. And with the new highways that have been rebuilt the last few years, it's maintaining its hotness. And we show that, and we've had so much growth on the I-41 corridor, we don't need TIF out there. In fact, it would be dangerous in some regards to look at TIF out there. The only two places that I would look at right now would be Aviation Plaza, where the Walmart used to be.
Thank you, that's on my list.
And Kmart. Those would be
because
the two.
those are along the 41 corridor.
But they're redevelopments.
Yeah.
I would consider those. But I've had people say, would you consider one on South Washburn next to like Bergstrom? And
no.
there's an are you crazy look that I have, and I can't, it's got to be genuine, so I can't repeat it for you, but I have this are you crazy look. and I've had other people say, well, what about this, what about that? Why would you need that? Someone said a few years ago where Buffalo Wild Wings and
Runaway Shoes
and also the Golden Corral, that was the old Ramada. And somebody suggested, well, we should TIF that. Just because it's closed and needs to get rehabbed doesn't mean it needs that. If you recall, in Grand Chute, Kmart had moved from Appleton into Grand Chute, and shortly after that it closed. And I was a little younger then, a little more brash, and somebody said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, the market will take care of it. And I truly believe that. And then it became a Gordman's, and now it's something else. I mean, that's just that Wild West approach that you can get when you have a high growth area. And the Highway 41 corridor, for the most part, does that. The market can do that without other tools. TIF is really the only tool. The only other thing I would say about tools, and I think we've made some improvements in our inspections division and our process improvement. If you can get people through the regulatory process quicker without sacrificing the intent of the regulations, that's an advantage that we can offer, and we've done that. And Mr. Alan Davis and I did it in Grand Chute, and we've replicated a lot of those things here. And people can come in and say, if you do these things, we'll get you through the process in a limited amount of time. Now, the caveat is the council still has to approve those things, but we'll get you in a position to get you the best possible chance of getting it approved. If it gets approved as a legislative item, but we can get those things done to make it faster. And when businesses take note of that, then there's like, we're going to come back. We're going to come back. And you know it was slow for a while here.
Yeah.
We had
Very
that
much
issue.
So. Yep. The city is in a kind of a, I don't want to call it a predicament, but in a way it is, because you can't force someone to take a certain area in which to put their business. You just can't do it. I mean, if I'm a businessman and I want to put a business in spot A, and you guys would rather it go in spot B, as long as spot A is zoned for my business, that's where I can put it. And my concern as a taxpayer and a citizen is we're getting so much stuff crammed into a small area along the 41 corridor. It's busier than I'll get out. It's crazy. And yet, then you go just a little bit further out, you see Aviation Plaza, you see where the old Kmart used to be, and people just aren't going there. And I don't know why. And yet I look at Aviation Plaza and I think, gosh, that would have been, I think, a better place for the Bucks Arena, the Wisconsin Herd as it's now called. Like or not like the name, it's Wisconsin Herd. that to me, because it has easier access on and off the highway, would have been a better place. But that's not where they wanted to go.
With respect to Aviation Plaza, here's the biggest problem with that area, and it's the name Aviation Plaza. It's in the airport overlay zone. You can't put a property that is considered a place of assembly and an arena and a restaurant are both considered places of assembly, and that runway zone, the runway zone goes right through the heart of Aviation Plaza, with the exception of the very northernmost part of that area. So Walmart was allowed there because that's not considered a place of assembly. We've had discussions with
What a weird
different
rule.
Yeah, it's just a weird rule. It's something that airports have. They have all these little drawings that they have off of their
when did
runways.
this happen out there,
That's
Mark?
been years.
Because I know that back in like I want to say in the 70s, early 80s, where Super 8 Motel is, there used to be a place called Daniel's Lounge, and they had an upstairs, I don't know if it was a restaurant downstairs, but upstairs they had a nice bar, and it was overlooking one of the runways. And so something
the drawing there must not be, yeah, it's weird how these drawings go, and they fan out from the end of the runway. And it ends just in Aviation Plaza, so the northern part you could do something with. And we've had discussions with folks, but it's like you got to stay in the northern part. You can't even put a little Subway store in there because restaurants are considered places of assembly.
And isn't that weird? Because right across the street from Aviation Plaza, you got
Well,
Is
you
it
have
Burger King?
Arby's, you've got Arby's, you've
yeah.
got Hardee's, you got. That's outside of it, so that
That's just
line
so
is just,
bizarre to
isn't
me.
it? So, but
That
this is
weird.
good information.
But so what? Yeah, it is good information for people to have and to mull over and discuss and talk about how stupid legislation can sometimes be, because it is. But so what? I mean, what can we look forward to? Are there any discussions about anything going in out there? Because Broken Shoes is sitting there by itself right now, and it looks so lonely.
I know. I go there all the time. I got 4 kids. I'm buying shoes a lot, and they are so lonely. And that's a successful store. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not. It's got to be the right thing that. But they had department stores there. They had Penny's. They had Rogan's. It's going to have to be something that's not a place of assembly. So at one point we talked about squeezing a restaurant on the very northern end and letting their restaurant and maybe even their catering business over there, because the catering business doesn't bring in guests. Catering business just makes food. But you can't put a daycare center there. You can't put an arena or a hotel. You can't put any of those things there. So that's the real challenge there. There was at one point the Sam's Club was looking at doing, then Walmart Corporation said, no, we're changing our business model. We're not going to put one there. Yeah. That's the type of a grocery, club store, those types of things, not a problem.
So is there anything that's on the radar screen right now for either Aviation Plaza or the old Kmart location?
Nothing on Aviation. There was a project that was approved by the Plan Commission, and then just something happened. It was going to be a different type of storage facility. It was going to be more business storage, and then they were going to move up the retail to be more closer to the road, which I thought was a great idea. And then a new person went to that company and they just killed the idea, and we got a notice that thanks but no thanks, we're not coming. So it was so close. I mean, we were very excited, and we thought it was a good use of the property.
Sure.
It was a good buffer with the multifamily there. I think it would have added character to that area, would have been more in keeping.
Yeah. Well, and let's face it, I mean, I think that if something was in there that might help, that I can't even think of the name of the Mexican restaurant right now.
It's changed again, so I can't
Yeah,
I
because
remember
it's
either.
changed again just recently, but that struggles. Whatever goes in there seems to struggle, and if there were other properties nearby, that might help them.
Yeah, and I think Kmart was set so far that you couldn't be a good compatible neighbor.
Yeah.
And so that's what I like, that idea. We're still talking to those folks and hoping that they reconsider, but right now, that's kind of in limbo.
Okay. Well, gosh, we're almost out of time here.
That's why I come back twice a year.
The Oregon Street Bridge and the Pioneer property. Let's talk about those two things. So we're talking about properties that are languishing. What's happening with Pioneer Inn? Is there anything on the radar screen there?
I'm still optimistic about it, Cheryl. I think the fact that the Wisconsin Herd Arena, I guess I got to get used to that too. The arena, I think, is generated interest. There's a local developer who has an option on the property, and I know he's still working on it, but those things take time. But I think, there's been a little more interest now that the arena's going in, so I'm optimistic.
Okay.
I keep saying that.
All right. Well, I'll try
to
be
maintain
so
my
too.
optimism.
And then we've got the Oregon Street Bridge, which recently was in the paper. It's starting to wear out. More money that we're going to have to come up with, I guess, as a community. But there's 3 different options, and 2 of them are to replace the existing bridge with another type of drawbridge. Another option is to replace it with a bridge that is not a drawbridge. It doesn't have to open at all. You would go over it, the vehicles would. And then the other one is what?
To basically rehab the existing bridge and give it
Okay.
another, add 25 years of life to it.
Okay. And, I mean, I think, it's just me as a citizen, I think just go for, if you're going to replace it, do the bridge that is a big enough arch that you don't have to have boats, delaying traffic and having mechanical parts that wear out because they're used all the time, and you don't have to have a bridge tender. Is the council, I know the council's discussed this, I didn't see what their discussions were, though.
The DOT makes the final determination, and the only recommendation I really made to council, because that's a pure policy decision. They did push me on the issue, and I said I very slightly lean towards what you had suggested with the full span bridge. And I know there were some folks there down there near the river that didn't like it. The council voted to recommend a new lift bridge, but the DOT ultimately has to make that decision. And while they really wanted a decision real fast, it's been a month since the council made the decision, and we haven't heard the final, or they made a recommendation. The council didn't make a decision. All they were able to do is make a recommendation.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard yet on what they're going to do. I still find it hard to believe that they're going to, if every community said, well, we want the drawbridge, which is the most expensive option, $33 to $35 million versus $14 to $16 million for the full span bridge that you referenced, or $9 to $11 million to rehab. At a certain point, they got to add up their nickels and dimes and say, we can only do so many of these really cool drawbridges and stuff. The money's going to have to draw the line. And you hear that all the time about stuff going on with the state and the transportation budget.
Sure.
And because our vote was so close again, it was a 4-3 vote, I suggested the council just be unanimous in whatever you vote on. Well, they didn't go unanimously. They had all good reasons why they picked their bridge choice. I think the DOT is going to probably do whatever they want, and they'll probably go with a cheaper option. That's just I'm just guessing, but...
well, cheaper is sometimes better. And so because it just real quickly, because it's a DOT thing, are there state dollars that go toward this then?
Good news, bad news. The good news is that this bridge, whatever bridge they build, will be done entirely with DOT dollars.
Okay.
That's the good news.
Still
the bad
comes
news
out of our pockets, though.
The bad news, though, is that the DOT has reinterpreted something that's been in state law for years, and now they're saying that bridge will be turned over, the deed of the bridge will be turned over to the city, and we will be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of that bridge from now on.
Another reason to go full span.
Yes, and that was part of the
And be
other
done
reason,
with
because
it.
you're paying we would have to pay the bridge tender, which
And the wear and tear on the parts.
we
So,
estimated just to maintain it $165,000 a year.
No.
We don't have that.
No. All right. We're out of time. We're done. Thanks
got a
for
whole
being
list
here.
of things.
I appreciate it. I know, but
I'll come back.
we covered a lot of stuff.
All righty.
All right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks to Mark, as always. Thanks to you at home for watching or on YouTube for watching, and thanks to the crew. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.